the story by Plutarch, not even to have come forth through his mother's womb, but to birth forth, but he supposedly burst forth through her side, tearing a gaping wound. And he is just the opposite of his brother Asar. He is the epitome of evil, or disorder and chaos, social disorder. Because I'm not even sure if the Kemites had a word. The Egyptians had a word for evil. At any rate, he and his brother are engaged in a perpetual conflict. You might say it's a struggle similar to light and day, or darkness and light. They are the original twins in a sense. Now, Set, according to the story, had, and there are many stories according to this, long before Christian Bible or Torah or Bhagavad Gita or Quran, etc., Rig Veda, thousands of years in Egyptian, I should say African history, these stories emerge, African mythology and religion. It is said that Set has his brother murdered. In fact, not only does he have him murdered, but he cuts his body up into 14 pieces and scatters the pieces throughout the land of Kemet, or Egypt. Now, his wife, Aset, becomes very instrumental in the story now, because when she hears the news of her husband's death, Osiris's death, Asar's death, she's grief-stricken. She's terribly upset, but she does not completely lose her head, and she does not lose hope. And she wanders over the land of Kemet, she wanders over Egypt, and she gathers 13 of the 14 missing pieces. And she takes them and puts them in the form of a mummy, wraps them up in the form of a mummy, and prays to the gods of ancient Egypt. And they, in fact, restore life to the slain Osiris. Now, the 14th piece is very critical.
Oh, yes, his genitals.
Which has been thrown into the Nile River where it was swallowed by a catfish. Last time I ate a catfish was shortly before I heard this story. Now, that is important, though. This is important because, in spite of that, Aset is able to conceive a child. And that child turns out to be Horus. And the major function of Horus is to avenge his father's death. Horus grows up, he begins to vanquish his uncle Set, who murdered his father, and Isis intervenes. Now, in that story, you have so many profound concepts. You have the story of one brother slaying another brother, similar to Cain and Abel. You have the story of an immaculate conception, the virgin birth. You have the story of rising from the dead, the resurrected Savior. You even have a story that deals with divine compassion, because it is Isis, or Aset, who suffers the most, other than obviously Asar, at her husband's death. But she is the one who steps in and intervenes and prevents the murderer from actually meeting his just due. So Isis is very, very profound. She is said to have wandered the land of Kemet, and in ancient times she becomes the most powerful of all the ancient deities, to the extent that it begins to make you wonder if we are not getting just the tail end of the story. That in ancient times, God is not in fact initially identified in the form of a female. Because once again, the name Isis or Aset means the throne, the seat of power. So Isis is very profound, and then we are later to identify her with Mary and the story of the Madonna and Child.
Danita, you've done considerable research on black queens, goddesses, Madonnas, and black women in ancient times. One area of interest is that of Isis and her legacy. Could you talk about that?
Isis was one of the most dominant goddesses in ancient Egypt, and her legacy